Welcome to Schmidt Talks, the podcast wing of my long-running blog at schmidtalks.com. My name is Heather Christena Schmidt. I'm a mom, a writer, and a critic of pretty much everything. I ran for city council in 2020, and I hold degrees in philosophy, political science, and public administration. I guess you could call me a jack of all trades or a Jane of many genres. In any event, this show is devoted to my thoughts on what's going on in the world, in my world, or whatever mood strikes. Today marks the season finale of my first season on this show, and I'm still working out the kinks. This season was titled Words Matter, and in it, I digested and dissected with all of you a new word or term each week-ish, with a few off in the middle. It was mostly political, a little philosophical, and in the end, I both lost and gained a lot of you. A lot of this is growing pains for me. The awkward AI introduction and conclusion, which you'll notice I left off on this episode, the song, getting comfortable with the sound of my own voice. It is new and it is jarring. I've been a writer for a very, very long time, and only now I'm really coming to terms with a world that is becoming less about words and more about sound and sight. People don't always want to read a long blog anymore, and if they can listen to it on a 30-minute car ride on the commute to work, that's where they're going to go. And I get it. It's the life that we live in, or the conditions that have presented themselves to us. But for me, it's still growing pains. So if you've made it this far, I do sincerely thank you and hope you'll stay. So today I want to talk in the finale of this first season, not about a single word or a general concept that has been torn to shreds by our postmodern, post-truth American culture. I want to talk about the idea that words matter and why it's so important. So I'm recording this episode on the eve of the 2022 midterm elections in America, and things seem more dystopian now than ever before. The Republican Party has largely stayed the course. They're driving home issues that are affecting Americans, everyday Americans, even when they aren't caused by politics or caused by actions of any particular person. They're just what sometimes happens. Some of them are things that are actually caused by Republicans. Yet it is still a convincing argument for people that are really ostensibly hurting. The Democrats, well, I don't really know what the hell is going on with them. And a lot of people, both outside and in the Democratic Party, agree. For the entirety of this election season, the Democrats have been all over the place. They cannot pick a topic. Rather, they're trying to tailor the topic to the audience without really having a unified front and being able to answer some of the central questions that are being posed about the future under their control, given what has happened over the last 2 years. Arguably, things have not gotten better, which a lot of people voted to happen. And of course, there's a lot of mess to clean up after Trump, but arguably, Biden and his Democratic Party's control has made some things worse. Many of the promises they made in their 2020 campaign bid have gone completely by the wayside. And in reality, they overpromised and underdelivered. All those lists and memes about everything the Democrats have gotten done, they're bullet points. They're bullet points of corporate donors that have been suited and appeased. COVID, student debt, housing, cost of living, healthcare for all, these were the things that mattered. Minimum wage, jobs. Yes, the Biden administration brought back a lot of jobs, but at the same time, people are having to work 2 or 3 just to pay their bills. That and that alone is not progress. These are the things that matter, and those are the problems that still persist in much of America. This is a fact, no matter what amount of spin that is spewed in its direction. It's a fact, and it's something the Democrats largely have not overcome, at least that I've seen. Maybe tomorrow the polls will show otherwise. In recent days, the emails have increased. And if you are unfortunate enough to be on either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party's email list, you know what I'm talking about. You have gotten hundreds of emails a day from people you are not even represented by. I'd probably get 20 a day from Val Demings. I wish her the best of luck, but I wish she'd take me off her email list. And the noise on the internet, it's gotten so loud you can barely get through it. Each party now takes the position that democracy is dead if they don't win. The hyperbole is that severe. If you know anything about American democracy or American government, really, or representative government, capitalism, or history of nations that are as clearly divided as America is, you know that democracy has been gone for quite some time. American representative government, that's been gone too. We've discussed it in other episodes, and I'll mention it again. Republicans are fascist, and the Democrats are fascist now too. They believe they have no other option but to be, that they have to move to the right in order to win. Vote blue no matter who. It's a GOP and fascist ideology with a blue ribbon tied around it. There are a lot of people called in the middle, and they are anything but. They're just people that want their basic needs met. They don't call themselves Democrats or Republican, and they're turned off by all this bullshit that both parties are slinging. They want to be represented by their representatives. They want to vote on issues. They swing left on some, they swing more right on others. Their politics are complicated, and 9 out of 10 days, they are not political. It doesn't really get much more complicated than that either for a lot of people in America. Did you make their life better? Yes or no? No one is listening to them, though. Democracy when no one will listen to you? I think not. So I was on Twitter the other day and I followed John Cooper. He's a blue MAGA Democrat. For those of you that do not know him, look him up, read some of his tweets. He's really he's really the cheerleader for the Democratic Party. He was very involved with the campaign against Trump in 2020. He knows the Bidens. He's very well connected with a lot of Democrats. I see his tweets and I think of him, like I said, like a cheerleader. Most of his tweets, I imagine he's waving those pom-poms up in the air. It is that bombastic and sometimes absurd. He's that kind of Democrat. It's all rose-colored in the eyes or blue-colored. Absolutely no criticism of his party whatsoever will be tolerated. Democracy? I think not. And I want to pause the story there for just a second and get back to this notion of democracy, because to me, a hallmark of a true democracy is not only equal input and representation of the people, but this notion that there will be accountability, even if it's holding accountable people on your side of the aisle or on the other side, and accountability in a time frame that makes sense. The fact that the January 6th committee has taken 2 years and still not gotten very far in holding any high-level person accountable is bananas to me. And then when you get to the accountability in their own party, it's impossible. In today's America, this isn't done. In fact, if you try and hold your so-called representatives and their cheerleaders, their feet to the fire, you're called a traitor. John Cooper calls people traitors. And many high-level Democrats call people traitors if they even suggest that things could be better. They say to move. I can't tell you how many people with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as their profile picture on Twitter or Facebook have told me to move out of the country if I don't like it. You're blasted, you're blocked, you're banished. In 2021, I was critical of Biden on Twitter about COVID, something we all should have been and should still be today. because thousands of Americans are continuing to die and they are doing nothing about it. To local Democrats, local to me, though, I was called a threat to democracy for saying that the man who was elected to fix COVID should fix COVID. A threat to democracy for holding our leaders accountable. Those that have turned a blind eye on truth and justice are, in actuality, the real threat to democracy. If you want to know why American democracy is dead, perhaps we should look no further than them. So getting back to John Cooper, he's one of them. He's one of these blue MAGA cheerleaders that has taken the ideas upon which this country was founded, lit them on fire, and ground them into a smoldering ash. I sometimes wonder if anyone involved in politics, or anyone who even is interested in politics, has read the Declaration of Independence or the American Constitution, because some of the things that our country was founded on are nowhere to be found today. Yet still, they and people like John Cooper, who this story is about, they have a platform built on cheerleading their team. John's platform is built on cheering on the Democratic Party and spreading information with a profound lack of evidence. This is one of the things that I feel torn on with this whole Elon Musk Twitter thing, because people like John Cooper have that little check mark by their name and are verified as an expert, and yet they will often provide absolutely no evidence or data to support their claims. For a party that touts itself as leaders in the fight against misinformation and disinformation, they sure seem to disseminate a lot of it. The other day, I saw that John Cooper, he had started tweeting misinformation about early voter turnout. And I know it's misinformation because I am getting hundreds of messages from the Democratic Party and Democratic Party insiders that I know to the contrary in my email box every single day. I've seen the numbers put out by our registrars around where I live in Southern California. Voter turnout is projected to be incredibly low. Youth voter turnout in particular is historically low, especially for early voting. Now, I've seen videos of kids lining up at college campuses to vote, and that's inspirational. And maybe, that will be enough to turn the tide and get more people to the polls. But for now, it is low. In my county, just 9% of voters of all ages have cast a ballot. In LA County today, the day before the election, only 5% of voters ages 18 to 35 have come. But here's John tweeting a big lie. Sound familiar? He says in one of his tweets, breaking in capital letters, like he is a source of news with zero credentials. Early voting numbers are through the roof, especially among young voters, women, and African Americans. 45% of the mail-in and early in-person votes were cast by Democrats versus 36% by Republicans. Clap emoji, clap emoji. So first of all, there's no way to know what percentage of Democrats or Republicans turned out just yet. That is released much later by county and state registrars after the votes have been tallied. It's just not been released yet. And the numbers that he cites, they're poppycock. To quote Joe Biden, they're malarkey. For lack of a better term, it's bullshit. I responded to John because it was such a crazy claim to come from somebody with a very, very large platform. You see again why, as crazy and trash of a human as Elon Musk is, he's onto something about people with a check mark making claims as an authority with absolutely no credentials or actual authority on the matter. So I responded to John, one of his thousands and thousands of replies that he gets. Normally they're all just people like, oh yes, I love Biden. Oh yes, blue, vote blue, no matter who, all that bullshit. I responded and asked a very level-headed and reasoned question. I simply asked, John, do you have a link to this data? Because local registrars all over the country are reporting the exact opposite. Do you have a link? Seemed pretty innocuous, and I thought he would ignore it. Someone replied to me though just a little bit later, and I didn't, get the notification for a while. I was making dinner or something like that. And when I went back on Twitter later on in the evening, I clicked on it and I saw the person's reply. They had, sent me a link with the actual data, which was consistent with what I had seen, which is unbelievably low early voter turnout. But something else stuck out to me when I clicked on it, because on Twitter, you can click and back and see what you wrote, and you can see what the original post was. And when I saw it, I saw that John Cooper had hid my reply. This idea, this American experiment, well, it's predicated on transparency and honesty and data and evidence. It is reliant on truth and justice and integrity. It is reliant on the people with the check marks having data to back their claims and speaking candidly and honestly with Americans. Democracy, as we call it, which being technical, it never was, and especially now is not, it depends upon not only fair and free elections, but trust in them. When people of all walks of political ideologies lie, when they make shit up, when they spin into hyperbole, propaganda, and misinformation just to rally their troops, when they can't take criticism and change course, when they cannot be held accountable, when they hide replies, when they ignore requests for evidence, when they block or blast anyone that seeks the truth or asks questions. Again, democracy? I think not. The truth of the matter is that so far, voter turnout is low for very predictable reasons. For one, it's a midterm election. Midterm elections also always have low voter turnout. And I suspect that if voter turnout remains low through election day, that both parties will cling to that fact like it is their last and only thread. And that's fine because there is a veil of truth to it. But there are other factors that play into low voter turnout, and we aren't talking about propaganda or theorizing here. We are talking about actual factual information, like studies that have been actually done, things that have been directly correlated to voter apathy, words rooted in reality. One of the most directly correlated causes of low voter turnout, or as most people come to understand it, voter apathy, is when people feel that their vote doesn't matter. A lot of people over time have tried to argue that this is because of gerrymandering, and maybe in some cases that really is true. Like, for example, in California, what's the point of voting in the presidential election, right? It's always going to go to the Democrats because California is a, kind of like a guaranteed blue state. But what really makes someone or a group of people feel that their vote doesn't matter is when they feel under or unrepresented, when their concerns fall on deaf ears, when they are struggling to put food on the table or to pay the rent, when family members are, still dying, or now, 15% of American adults now disabled from COVID infection, and 700,000 Americans dead under Joe Biden's watch. When they see that, or when they are experiencing that, when they are living all of these struggles, and the John Coopers of the world are squawking at them about vote blue no matter who, it kind of makes you feel like not voting. I see one person that I know in the local Democratic Party posting constantly on every social media platform, yeah, inflation sucks, but fascism is worse. And it's like, man, you have never struggled to look your children in the eyes and tell them there's just nothing for dinner. When someone at the Supreme Court leaks the opinion of a rogue court that is poised to overturn Roe versus Wade, And both the United States Congress and the White House have weeks to do something about it. And they do nothing. They fundraise off it. They support anti-choice Democrats. They try to block and hide the fact that they've had plenty of opportunities to codify Roe into law and not done so. And then they allow reproductive rights to just go away. What more can you expect? When people are struggling to buy bread or pay their rent, when they can't put gas in their car and they're told, we'll buy electric. I could go on and on and on about all the ways in which our government, both Democrats and Republicans, are failing to respond to the needs of their constituents, to our needs. This is an oligarchy. I can't tell you how many times I've seen regular everyday people correlate comments by blue MAGA Democrats like John Cooper to, Marie Antoinette saying, let them eat cake. Oh, you can't put gas in your car? Let them buy electric. They're so clearly in the pocket of special interests and lobbyists and squeezing every last penny they can from the taxpayer coffers before this whole system goes broke. But you all get the point. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball to know how the election will go tomorrow. But more importantly, I don't know the consequences of it in the long run. I will say that for myself, I made a calculated choice again about what was the less of two evils. To say democracy is over if Democrats don't win is foolish and wrong. But to argue that things will get better with Republicans at the helm is outright insane. This year, voting is just about looking at the picture and figuring out what is the least bad way to go. Both MAGA parties present to us a dystopian president and a nearly impossible future unless we demand to, at the very least, say what we mean and act on promises going forward. This year, I say vote, yes, but speak up, speak louder, and speak more clearly when you're done. When you're done voting, call your representative, call your congressperson, and demand more. Hold them accountable. Don't just sit on the sidelines and watch. When you see the John Coopers of the world hiding replies, call it out. Demand evidence when they lie. Words matter, and what matters along with them is the actions that stand behind them. And it is our actions that are just as culpable if we say nothing. This concludes season 1 of Schmidt Talks. Season 2, entitled I'm Here for Now, kicks off Thanksgiving weekend. Visit schmidttalks.com for more about my podcast, my blog, to connect on social media. And if you have any advice or tips on this podcast, click the contact link and send me an email. Stay safe and healthy.